Welcome to Sacrilegious Discourse.
I'm husband.
And I'm wife.
Together, we're reading the Bible for the very first time.
We grew up without religion and wanted to know what all the fuss was about.
Well, what have we learned so far?
That God is a dick, and apparently some people believe in talking donkeys?
We're not trying to pass ourselves off as experts.
Nope, we're just reading the Bible for the first time and giving our first take reaction.
If you'd like to join us in this venture, you might consider starting at episode 1.
Otherwise, jump in wherever you like.
All right, let's go read the Bible.
Yeah, let's get to it. Husband!
Wife!
What are we doing today?
Well, today is Saturday, which means that we're doing
Q&A Saturday.
That's-
It's almost the end of the day, but we're still doing it anyway on Saturday.
Boy, you fucked me up. That's
I did.
right.
Yes. Yes.
So what are we Qing and Aing today?
I didn't have any specific questions that I could recall, and you didn't have any either that I could recall, so I'm just kind of going back over some stuff in the previous week. Call it like a mishmash, a hodgepodge, a potpourri, if you will,
Okay.
of various items that I found within chapters 11 through 15 of
Just
Jeremiah.
Some miscellaneous debris, huh?
Yeah, debris.
Okay,
I like
right,
that.
yeah. All right. So are you ready to go ahead and answer some Q's and have some A's?
Sure.
All right. Let's do this.
Okie dokie. All right, so we are covering chapters 11 through 15 of Jeremiah.
Okay.
And the first little tidbit that I come to is let us not forget that chapter 11 includes the first of the passages known as the Confessions of Jeremiah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're the things where he's like telling on himself and telling on the people and
Right.
being a general pissy little
I
prophet.
don't know how. So like, just to I know we're gonna get into some other stuff, but like Jeremiah, right? He's out there preaching all this like God's gonna come get you, he's gonna kill you, but then he's like, God, can you not? Like, I don't know what to think of him.
Because he's also like, but get them.
Right, yeah.
Kill them, but not me. But
specifically, he's got like
any of
vengeance against specific people. He's like,
Yeah.
can you go kill those fuckers, please?
Right.
While you're at it, killing everybody, can you kill those?
Yeah.
But also, can you not kill any of us? Because like you're kind of being mean, dude.
Right.
But also, hey, everybody, he's gonna come kill us.
Right.
Like, wow, you got some mixed messaging going on here, man.
He's very much a waffler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know if you recall, but verses 2, 3, and 4 of chapter 11 go as such.
Okay.
Hear the words of this covenant. Which covenant?
Right.
And speak to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and say to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, cursed is the man who does not obey the words of this covenant.
Yeah, it was very confusing when we went over that back then.
Which I commanded your fathers in the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by this covenant?
Okay.
What's happening there?
It had to be one of the. I mean, if he's talking about the days that he brought them out of
Mm-hmm.
Egypt, it probably was one of the covenant, like from
Yes.
the early on.
Yes. Yes. So first of all, let me just say there is some controversy that I wasn't aware of until I was trying to find something to even talk about.
Okay.
There's some controversy as to whether or not the Israelites had access to the Pentateuch at this time,
Really?
as it had been lost by priests and scribes in the temple, you'll recall.
Now so this gets to another point that I've kind of harped on
Yes.
without knowing this information
Right.
throughout, and that's that do these people actually know what they're being held to account for?
Right.
And it doesn't feel like they are because there's all these prophets saying different things. So if they're all out there just saying whatever the fuck they want,
Mm-hmm.
who's the one saying the correct information? But
Exactly.
this makes it even more difficult, apparently.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Apologists claim that this verse proves that Jeremiah must have possessed the whole Pentateuch at least, and that he also had access to many of the prophets, likely including Isaiah. So they're like, why would he say, listen to the prophecies of how you broke the covenant? Like, what covenant is he referring to? Therefore, that is proof that he had access to the covenant as it was recorded.
Okay.
So, but, people like me and you would come along and be like, just because it says that he wrote it doesn't mean he
had it.
did.
Right, yeah.
Like, if it was written hundreds of years later and then, like, backdated,
Well, look, no, so, I mean, our reference point is today, right?
Yeah.
And I could totally see, like, let's say all scripture disappeared overnight, right?
Sure.
I could totally see some, prophet-y type person in the evangelical Christian right being like, well, I know the things that were said, and this is the covenant that we follow, and you should follow that covenant, and if you don't do that, then, blah, 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 and then they'll just use all their words to mean whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a controlling factor that you can control people with without actually stating anything.
Now, that is pretty much the entire premise of the film The Book of Eli. All books disappear, and people that can remember pages of books, or even whole books in their entirety, are very much sought after.
Right.
Because this is like in the future,
Got it. Some apocalyptic thing happens or something.
Yeah, and so, like, there are no books, so, like, no Shakespeare, no Bible,
right?
Like, all the great things, right? And so this one guy, for whatever reason, he's able to recall the entire Bible in entirety.
Right, but then, if you look at so if I'm looking at that instance of something like that happening in history, I have to question, okay.
But how well do you really...
He says he remembers it all.
Right.
But is he ad-libbing bits? Is he, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Which, does he really know it all? And how much of, and then at that even, you have to question, which version of it did he know?
Right, right. And, did he remember it, like, in entirety, or did he remember it in bits and pieces that were filled in?
Right.
What language? Now, I believe in the movie, he was, like, struck by God. Like, he was a prophet chosen to, if I recall correctly. I only saw it once, and it was years ago.
Sure.
But who cares? Because it gets to the point of the matter, which is that I don't know that these people had access to this information.
Right.
So...
And anybody who's ever played a game of telephone knows that by the time you get to the end of the line, the fucking message is garbled.
It's so garbled that it's very likely not even a single word will be what the original message was.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's that, okay?
Yep.
And then verse 4 continues, which I commanded your fathers in the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt from the iron furnace, saying, obey my voice and do according to all that I command you. Now, I said this at the time, but I don't think it, like, struck because we were talking about the chapter itself instead of, like, various interesting notes.
Right.
This is the third place in the scriptures where Israel's agony in Egypt is described as an iron furnace. It was also mentioned in Deuteronomy and in 1 Kings.
Okay.
So many scholars think that a part of Israel's slave labor in Egypt was to work as slaves in literal iron furnaces. Which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, doesn't change the story any, but the fact that it's mentioned more than once leads you to believe, wow, okay, so that must have been the work that they were doing.
Right, right.
Which I didn't even know that Egypt had iron furnaces. So,
I mean,
interesting.
So they whatever, yeah.
Cool.
I didn't either, but I mean, we've been in the Bronze Age, went into the Iron Age, so I mean, obviously there was iron furnaces.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. But this would have been during the time of Moses.
I can't remember. Yeah, I thought that was almost, well, that might have been in the beginning. Like, I think a lot of the stuff in the Bible happened kind of on the cusp of Bronze Age, Iron Age.
Okay.
The early stuff.
Okay.
So that might be what was going on. And obviously Egypt was a very, and I'm just talking out my ass here. Don't take any of this as like historical fact or anything.
Right.
But I mean, they were a more advanced society. They were more, so I mean, maybe they had it before the Israelites did, or I don't know. Yeah. I'm just guessing.
Who could know?
So.
Well, and the Israelites didn't have a home of their own at that point, so they wouldn't have had that kind of technology.
Yeah.
All right.
And it would also explain something like, you know how God is early on in the Bible is scared or can be harmed by iron.
Yes, that's true.
Right. It would explain a lot of that type of talk and mentality.
The fear
Yeah.
of it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, it's just, again, this is
all
hypotheses that I'm just going with in my head.
That's interesting. Like, I hadn't put those two facts together, but what do we know about iron? Well, apparently they were doing that kind of work during their slavery in Egypt.
Right.
And also their God was kind of afraid of iron early on.
Right.
So why would those two things not be connected?
Right, right.
Interesting.
It seems legit to me.
Sure. So moving on to verse 21 of that chapter, where was I? 11. Therefore says the Lord concerning the men of Anathoth who seek your life, saying, do not prophesy in the name of the Lord, lest you die by our hand. So this was the bit where we learned that the people of Anathoth, which was Jeremiah's home, was the people of his own village wanting to kill him.
Yeah.
And that was like, whoa, dude.
And my question is not how to save him from it, but what the fuck did he do?
Well, much of Jeremiah's work was done during the days of the reforming King Josiah. One thing Josiah did was to shut that shit down with regard to disobedient and unauthorized sacrifices on the high places.
Okay.
Which were outside the altar at the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And recall, he was like either in the gate of Jerusalem or walking through Jerusalem or walking through his own hometown where those people would have gone to Jerusalem on a regular basis. So the local priests at Anathoth may have resented that their shrine was shut down. And they may have hated Jeremiah because he supported Josiah.
Oh, okay.
And meanwhile, he's walking around telling these priests, y'all are doing this shit wrong. Y'all are talking like you know what the fuck God is saying, and he ain't saying that.
Well, it sounds to me like he's pushing the king's agenda, not necessarily God's agenda.
But he keeps on even after Josiah.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, you know, these things get started in a way and then they continue, but I mean...
But he was just some guy. Like, yes, he was from a wealthy family, and yes, he was in probably a wealthy town since it was near Jerusalem.
Sure.
But he was still just one guy. Like, he wouldn't necessarily have had access to the king, especially if he was like the lone gunman doing so.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to believe if he was the only one that he was doing the king's bidding.
But I can also see this whole scenario being mixed up in politics at the time.
Sure.
Because that's what it feels like. You know,
maybe he was on Josiah's court. Who knows?
Right. And maybe he didn't know the king personally, but like it does sound like he was at least
on board with what
doing that
Josiah was saying.
Right, yeah.
But the question still remains though, did they have access to the Pentateuch? And so why was Josiah making these reforms, and why was Jeremiah on board with it? So I just find that whole thing very interesting, to say the least. And
again, it could be based on politics, you know, not necessarily religion, but politics, you know. And you know as well as I do that people who want to find a way to present a certain idea will find a way to present that certain idea.
And people who want to believe a certain idea will twist their mind into pretzels to make an idea work.
Yeah.
That shouldn't.
Yeah.
So moving on to chapter 12. If we read verse 5. If you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, then how can you contend with the horses? And if in the land of peace in which you trusted they wearied you, then how will you do in the floodplain of the Jordan?
And this is where God was like chastising Jeremiah about.
Yes.
He was kind of complaining like they're fucking with me and they're calling me names and they don't like me. And
well, he was saying his question here was, why do the evil profit?
Right.
Why do they get, like, why aren't you striking them down? And and they're mocking me. And why are you allowing this? And this is bullshit.
Sure.
And so God's answer was, if Jeremiah found it difficult in his own hometown of Anathoth, how's he going to fare in Jerusalem, where the people are going to be much more cruel because they won't be his townsmen, family, and friends.
Yeah.
They'll be strangers and people in high places.
I find it a bit laughable that God is giving advice on how to deal with humans.
Right.
Because his answer is always just kill them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, he's no better at dealing with shit than anybody else.
But something that I found interesting in the notes that I picked up were that the trouble he was having in Anathoth were nothing compared to the troubles he would have later in Jerusalem, Babylon, or Egypt. And then I had to stop reading.
Okay.
Because apparently some shit is going to go down for my dude.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
And so, like, he better, tighten his belt because it's going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better.
So this is a little bit of, like, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a God foreshadowing moment.
Got it. Okay.
That he's like, you better get used to it, bro.
Right.
So, in the same chapter, we get Yahweh's lament and some stuff about Judah and her enemies. And in this part, God continues his previous reply to Jeremiah with a lament, first in a tone of exhausted grief and then of destructive rage, but he ends with a look toward the future and a hope for Israel to be returned to its inheritance. And that's where in the chapter we were like, my guy is going back and forth. God is going to kill him, but there will be a remnant, but he's going to wipe them all out, but there'll still be some fucking grapes left.
Right.
Like, he's going to bring them back. And I'm like, how are you going to bring them back if you're going to kill them all? And there was a whole section in that chapter that, again, waffled. So it's no wonder that Jeremiah's waffling when fucking Yahweh's waffling.
Right. That's true.
So verse 9 of that chapter says, my heritage is to me like a speckled vulture. The vultures all around are against her. And that's where, if you'll recall, we were like, the fuck is a speckled vulture?
Yeah, I remember you stopped it and told us.
Yeah.
I can't right off the top of my head recall.
It just was, rebellious Judah will now be seen as a conspicuous
Stuck
as
out
a
like a sore
speckled
thumb.
bird.
Right.
Yeah, sore thumb. Whose unusual plumage provokes the enmity of other predators. Judah would be set upon by the surrounding nations.
Got it.
Like, there are many bird species where if one of their baby birds comes out with like spots or doesn't look right, that the other members of that nest will peck it to death.
Right.
Like, chickens apparently do this hardcore, and it's where the term like henpecked comes from. Yeah, they
don't want to draw attention to themselves.
Yeah, so they're like, you are either a predator or will draw a predator, so we will peck you to death now. Thank you, goodbye.
Right.
And so that goes along with what God is saying he's going to do later, future chapters here.
Yeah.
Where he's like, y'all going to get dragged by dogs, y'all going to get eaten by wild everything, like, you're done.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of the beginning of that.
Got it.
So moving on to chapter 13, that's where we get into the underwear or the sash or the girdle or whatever we want to call it.
Right.
So the hiding of the linen sash, I found some more information about that, which we were so intrigued, I felt was worthy of mention.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the sash was made of linen. And it may have been a belt, girdle, waistband, loincloth, or waistcloth, or, as we mentioned, even a pair of undies.
Right.
Why linen? Linen was a mark of the priesthood, and because this garment was given as a representation of Israel, it had to be linen in order to properly symbolize that nation of priests unto God, which Israel was intended to be.
Okay.
So it had to be holy cloth, not just cloth.
Got it.
Okay, and linen
so it's not likely that it was... I mean, like, the reading that we did in that chapter of underwear was fun, but it's probably more likely meaning some sort of a priestly garment. Is that what you're saying?
No, it was definitely... I'll get into that in a second, but actually, this paragraph covers that. Okay. This was not an outer girdle, but a covering worn next to the skin.
Okay, all right.
But made of linen and something that a
Got
priest
it.
Would wear. But
so
it was innerwear.
Also, it's underwear and also
yes.
Priestly garment.
Yes.
Okay.
Priestly underwear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This very intimate and personal garment symbolized the intimate relationship between God and Israel. Jeremiah was not to wash the garment either before or after he had worn it. We kind of skipped right over that.
Yeah.
Like, I had to reread that section because I don't think we were even... Like, there was so much else going on.
Was that actually said in the...
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes. we were so full of laughter at underwear that
Yeah.
we missed this bit.
Yeah.
Various explanations have been offered regarding the command not to put the girdle in water before Jeremiah wore it.
I do recall that being said. That when he
Okay.
said it like that, yeah.
See, I don't recall it, so I'm glad you do. Now, most scholars think that he was to wear it as made in its rough state, without washing it first, in order to show the rude condition of the Jews when God adopted them. So,
Okay.
unclean, unsoftened, just
Right.
rough linen. And then he put it, right on his testicles to show, how he was like making that, you're my special underwear.
Right, right.
Likewise, it is regarded by many as intended to teach the Jews their corrupt state by nature, so that it was through favor or grace only that God adopted them.
Okay.
Like, even though you are rough and unclean and underwear, I'm still going to choose you anyway because I'm so fucking awesome.
That sounds in line with God's thinking. Like, he likes to cut on the Israelites.
The backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love you so much, you worms. Aren't you
Yeah.
lucky that you have me to love you?
Yeah.
Now fear me.
Right.
Some are of the opinion that it was to remain unwashed in order to show that it was newly made and had not been worn by another nor polluted.
Okay.
So, to show as part of the symbol, like, look, everybody, this is not grody because I'm about to, put it away in a crevice here.
Right.
So that's interesting. And still others think that the purpose was to show that nothing was to be done by the prophet to cause the girdle to rot. And being wet might have done that in order to prove that the rottenness proceeded only from the Jews themselves.
Oh, okay.
Like, look,
Right.
I'm wearing it next to my
So
balls
it's-
and my asshole. I'm the one that made it dirty.
Got it.
See?
So whatever the case may be, it was definitely a lot of symbolism.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Next was a bit about finding the decayed, useless sash. No doubt a vision here is being narrated, not a real transaction, as some think, who regard Jeremiah as having gone there, to the Euphrates.
Yeah.
But the Euphrates was like a few days away.
Right.
So he would have had to go there, hide it in a cave, come back, wait a few days, go back to the Euphrates again, dig up his nasty undies, and bring them back.
Right.
And meanwhile, this whole time he's supposed to be like walking around town, with a sandwich board singing "The End Is Nigh."
Right.
So
Yeah,
it doesn't seem likely that he would have taken time out to travel for this. It was more likely a narration of like a story, a parable.
Yeah.
Not a real transaction, as some think, who regard Jeremiah as having actually gone there. But what can be imagined more absurd? One of the readers asks. He was, as we know, continually engaged in his office of a teacher among his own people. Had he undertaken so long a journey, and that twice, it would have taken him some, months, not days, months.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That makes it even more unlikely that he actually did it.
Yeah.
Hence, contentious must he be who urges the words of the prophet and holds that he must have gone to the Euphrates and hidden there his girdle. We know that this form of speaking is common and often used by the prophets. They narrate visions as facts.
Got it.
And I'm like, you literally just discredited every single part of the Bible by admitting that sometimes they say shit that ain't true and pretend it's a fact.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you don't say.
So what you're really saying is that we have to put into question everything in the Bible.
Yes.
And question whether it's an actual fact or if it's just something they made up.
Yes.
Okay.
As a parable.
Right.
Yes. That is what I took from that. I'm glad that you also. So then we continue in this chapter to verse 18. Say to the king and to the queen mother, humble yourselves. So the king and queen mother were probably Joachim and Nehushta, respectively, which I mentioned at the time. And
Okay.
they were like, okay, that sounds great. Whatever.
Right.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Jeremiah claims that the king and others of the royal family will suffer the humiliation of being stripped of their royalty and taken to Babylon as common prisoners, along with citizens from the farthest areas of the kingdom. So he's telling them, humble yourselves now and take God,
or you're going to pay the price.
or you're going to be humbled later, not of your own choosing.
Right, right.
The humbling's a coming. You get a choice in how that goes down.
Got it.
Is what he's saying.
Sure.
Which I was like, all right, that's cool. That makes sense.
Yep.
So moving on to chapter 14, the droughts. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's read about the droughts.
Okay.
So verse 1 says, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah concerning the droughts. So this portion of Jeremiah's prophecy clearly came during a season when Judah was afflicted by droughts, which were always a life or death issue in ancient societies where most made their living farming. Makes sense.
Yep.
Drought was a particularly special issue for ancient Israel and Judah because the Canaanite idol Baal was thought to be the god of weather and rain. Many ancient Israelites were drawn to Baal worship because they needed rain for their crops. And, Yahweh ain't giving it. So
right.
Why not ask the guy that's specifically in charge of the weather?
No wonder it was so hard to get rid of them. I mean, you're talking about a very arid region of the world.
Yes.
And they are very reliant on farming practices. And they're used to asking this certain god for favors with regard to that.
Yes.
And when that's their entire livelihood, how do you get a whole group of people to say, yeah, we're just going to ditch this and go with this other guy?
A general god instead of a specific god.
Right.
Like a god who's supposed to rule everything instead of this one minor god who, look, his whole purpose is the fucking rain.
Yeah.
He's a specialist in rain. It's like if you have a broken bone, you don't go to your family doctor. You go to the people who handle fucking bones, right? You see a specialist.
Well, and the more we learn about this, the more that this whole thing, like Judaism, right?
Yeah.
Early Judaism feels more like an elite club of people that were the ones that were specifically Jews, right?
Yeah.
Like the kings and the prophets and the priestly types. They're the ones that are strictly Yahweh.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the people never made that same journey with them. They're like,
right.
Who are we? What are we worshiping today?
Right.
I don't really give a fuck. I just need some goddamn rain.
Look, we're going to get in trouble if our crops don't grow and we're not able to, pay our tax to the king and the priest and all that shit. So I honestly don't really give a fuck who brings the rain. Can it just please happen?
Yeah.
Like, my ass is grass regardless. So, yeah, I mean, we've said it before. Like, it doesn't matter to these common people. They're just trying to get through their fucking day with enough food on the table.
Yeah.
Drought had long been threatened by God for disobedience and was part of the covenant curses, which I will get to that in just a second.
Okay.
The Lord's purpose in sending the drought was to bring the nation to repentance, which is ironic since the punishment just pushed the nation further into the arms of the other gods.
Right.
So, okay, let's talk about the covenant.
Yeah.
Because I was going to get into that and then we got onto something else instead.
Right.
Okay. So the covenant that they are talking about was way back. Do you remember when there was two mountains and a valley in between?
Yes, and they were yelling from the top of them. And
yeah, they were yelling the blessings and the cursing. One was blessed mountain, one was cursed mountain.
Right, yeah.
And they had to yell the things back to each other, and the people in the middle had to say amen.
Right.
Their agreement. Yes, this sounds perfect. I agree.
Right.
Sign me up. That's what is happening right now, according to God. He's like, y'all made these promises. I will be your God. I will bring you to this land of milk and honey. I will make your food plentiful. I will make you live in peace, etc., etc. The only thing that I ask of you is that you fear me and make me your one God and turn away from the other idols and plus all the 10 rules and plus a bunch of other petty bullshit.
Got it.
That's all I ask of you is 1,000 minor little Sabbath day, don't pick up the wrong sticks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you disregard these, you just signed up for all those curses that you shouted to each other from Curse Mountain.
You say you just signed up, but we're talking about generations ago.
Right. What he's saying, you, the Israelites.
Right.
That's
I personally have a problem in talking about multi-generational
right.
groups of people
Yeah.
as having the same you didn't a contract that my great 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 grandfather signed up for
Yeah.
doesn't fucking apply to me.
No, it doesn't.
Right? Like, so I have trouble with this thought that the Israelites, no matter how many generations we go forward, are all bound to this same contract, bound to the same idea,
Right.
and especially with maybe not even knowing what the goddamn thing was.
Right.
You know, it
Right.
just seems ridiculous.
Now, I'm not saying that I agree, obviously, with God. I'm not saying that this is what happened. I'm saying that this is what's being presented from a legal standpoint. God is saying, you, fill in the blank,
Yeah.
Israelites made this deal with me. I held up my end of the bargain. I've held back punishing you for ages. And y'all are beyond repair to where when you pray now, I'm not even going to listen to you anymore.
Right.
You done broke the last one, you know, and I've looked away for the last day. Punishment has come due. And he's presenting it. The Bible is presenting it as God presenting it as a legal case, and where God is in the moral correctness.
And that's all well and good. And but as we've said before, if he's going to hold these people to account for these things, these rules need to be reiterated on a generational basis,
as they used to be when they used to like have their little celebrations and they carved them in stone. Remember?
Right.
And they would go out and repeat them at each other.
Right. And maybe some of these things still happen. I don't know. But more than just as a group of people celebrating these things or telling these stories, God himself should show up and reiterate these things.
Right.
And not just to some random prophet when there's other prophets saying different shit.
Exactly.
But it needs to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, at least back in the times of Moses, at least the Bible made it seem like Moses was very clearly the prophet.
Right.
The person, right?
Right.
Was there still some contention? Yes, there was still some contention. There was the, I forget who the rebellion of, I can't remember what the name was now.
Oh, shit. Yeah,
but
I don't
you know what I'm talking
his
about,
name.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there was some, and even Aaron, you know, he was
melting
gold down and creating idols when he was up on the mountain.
What was his sister's name?
I can't remember now.
Started with an M, right?
That sounds probably correct, yeah.
I said Marion, but that can't be right.
I don't recall.
Well, she didn't speak up much after that, so.
No, she didn't. She didn't. Yeah. But I mean, so there was contention, but it was still very spelled out that
he's the man.
Moses is the man.
Right.
Right. So even in Isaiah and Jeremiah, they allude a lot to other people talking about different ideas.
And again, there's even this question now we find out of whether or not the people even had access, whether the prophets even had access, whether the king even had access to the original fucking rule book, the law, the Torah, the Pentateuch.
Yeah, so then just to bring it back, the generational, the holding account for generations of this doesn't make sense to me if you don't have the correct information. Right. And I don't agree with it.
Yeah, no, I totally, I stand with you on this.
Right.
So in verse 11, God says, "Then the Lord said to me, do not pray for this people, for their good." Okay, so he's telling Jeremiah,
right,
don't even pray, I'm not listening.
Yep.
So the people of Judah were at this point so hardened that they were past prayer. Their course was set.
I see.
And
so there's no hope for them.
Yeah. It is significant that God had to tell Jeremiah not to pray because the assumption would be that he would pray and that God had to tell him not to.
Sure.
And then he did anyway, of course.
Right.
Which, yay.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that you can actually be past prayer because...
Yeah, because that means that there is a point that you apparently can reach. Yeah. That means you can no longer be redeemed.
Right. At least in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament,
pre-Jesus.
Yeah.
You could reach a point.
Because the way that the Christians talk about it today, as long as you ask for forgiveness, you're good to go. You could be the worst raping killer motherfucker on the planet, and you could ask for forgiveness and you're good.
Yeah. at least according to God's law, not necessarily
Sure.
man's
Yeah.
law. But yeah, I find that interesting, and I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out in the New Testament, if there's a point of no return.
I've actually thought about this on a personal level, as far as can you imagine? Okay, I just entertain this thought with me for just a second. If we decided to approach some large religious group and say, "Hey, we were thinking about converting to Christianity," do you think that they would probably shit themselves with glee that we would be willing to renounce our atheism and then join them because we're so public about our atheist views, right?
Yeah.
They'd be like, "Oh my God, we got some real atheists, and they're gonna come over and join us.
We got them.
We got them.
We won."
And then we could become like, right wing MAGA evangelical stars.
If we
could be rich and famous.
If we wanted to sell our souls
if we want to sell our souls,
yeah.
Not that I believe in souls, but I mean,
or the devil,
right? But it's just something that had crossed my mind. Like, there is no they don't care. They don't have any problem just allowing anybody in as long as you're going to pitch their viewpoints. They don't care who you are. And especially if you used to be exactly opposite.
Yeah.
They're like,
they could pitch that story.
Shit,
that's
man.
Gold
this is awesome.
I could never do that.
Oh, I could never. I could not either. Because the whole reason we do this podcast is because it's about a subject that we enjoy learning about and talking about, and we're able to sit here and riff off each other,
and apply critical thinking at the same time.
Right. I couldn't do that. I am not invested in the belief of God or any of these writings in any way whatsoever. There's no truth in it to me,
Like,
there is some.
You could pay me millions and my life could be set, and there would not be enough therapy in the world to help me sleep at night because I could not take it seriously.
Right. There is a very small amount of historical beauty and poetry in these pages that I could get behind a little bit for certain aspects of it, right?
Sure.
But that is the absolute most I could say.
But
about
to
these
go
books.
out and sell this religion as authority and stuff.
Yeah, no.
Would you do that?
Never.
Me neither.
No, I swear right now we will never not be atheists. Like I keep coming across this in social media, and that there are so many people, and I mean I've come across hundreds, maybe even 1,000, but I've come across so many people that have ex-atheist in their fucking profile page.
I call bullshit.
You maybe drifted away from your religious upbringings,
right?
And maybe you went out and drank, maybe you went out and did this, that, or the other. But if you were an atheist,
mm-hmm.
I call bullshit that you went back.
Right.
I know that there are some instances. Some people do come back, but there's usually a precipitating event because religion generally feeds on the people that are at their lowest points, right?
Right.
So somebody dies, or you've lost your job, or you succumb to alcoholism, or I don't know, any number of things that create a very low point in your life, right?
Yeah.
And then religion pops in, helps you, and talks you back into religion.
Sure.
I can see it happening.
Sure.
I can believe that it happens. But the amount of people that I see with that, I'm just like, no, this isn't what it is.
You were never an atheist. You were just a non-practicing religious person.
Right. You see the same thing popping up with people who claim to be ex-gay or XL.
Wow, how does that work?
No, it's a thing. I mean, it's the same people that are ex-atheists.
Then I really call bullshit. You don't just over the years. Well, I used to be attracted to these kind of people, but now I'm just not attracted to these kind of. That's not how that works.
Right.
You don't just stop. Whatever. That's getting into a different discussion.
Yeah. No, but it's just the hypocrisy, right?
Yeah. And the lies.
Yes.
The lies.
Right.
Okay, so moving on to verse 13. Then I said, Ah, Lord God, behold, the prophets say to them, You shall not see the sword, nor shall you have famine, but I will give you assured peace in this place. So Jeremiah was not the only one who claimed to bring such a word. Others also claimed to be prophets, which we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The message of the other prophets was that there would be deliverance from sword and famine. So the exact opposite.
Sure.
God would rescue. This was a hopeful, positive message that contrasted with what God gave to Jeremiah. Jeremiah probably hoped to explain or excuse the lack of repentance among the people and leaders of Judah. They didn't truly repent because other prophets told them everything would be fine. The prophet urged excuses for the people and persistently cried for mercy upon them. So he's like, God, they're hearing other people. Don't be mad at them. It's not their fault.
I gotta be honest, if I was a person living back then and there's this impending doom heading towards us, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna want to hear the good news, not the bad news. You know, like I'm gonna be like, these guys seem to think that we can be saved. This guy says we're all gonna die. I'm gonna go with the guy that thinks we can be saved.
Now I'm gonna push back. I'm not gonna call bullshit, but I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because we're actually living through that right now with the climate crisis. You are not turning to the good news of, oh, don't worry, the climate will be fine. You are more inclined to say, oh my God, the planet is doomed. We are fucked.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth. So I don't think that you would
Okay, you're right. I mean, I have a skeptical mind. I like to think critically about things that are happening. And so, yes, you're probably right. I would not accept the good news just on the face value. But I can understand. I can understand why people would want to flock to the good news versus the bad news.
But what's interesting is that that's not what sells newspapers. So even back then, they had to have a sense that, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. But yet still, people were flocking. They were trying to get people to flock to the good news. And it's like, but you like the people were flocking to the good news, right? Like the people were like, no, we'll be fine. We're going to live through this. It'll be great. God forgives.
Well, and it's all in how the message is delivered too, though. I mean, maybe Jeremiah wasn't the best deliverer of the message, right?
Right.
Maybe he was not loquacious. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Talkative.
Yeah. It didn't sound right coming out of my head. So, but maybe he wasn't the right person for the job, you know? Maybe he was saying it wrong.
God should know who's the best person for the job.
You would think.
Sure.
But, you know, if you got a better way of phrasing good news than this person has of phrasing the bad news, like if you're gonna pitch the fire and brimstone, you gotta pitch it hard.
Yeah.
You gotta go all in, you gotta believe it. And even in this book so far, Jeremiah has kind of, you know, floundered back and forth between, you know, begging for forgiveness from God for the people to telling them. I mean, like I don't feel like he fully believes his own message that he's giving.
Right.
That's how I feel about Jeremiah.
You're probably onto something there.
Right.
So moving on, God's response is, well, too bad. The people should have known that the Lord punishes sin, and they should not have believed the false prophets. The judgment of the nation is spoken of here because the people were willing to be deceived. They chose to be tricked. They preferred to believe.
And they were supposed to know that they were being deceived. How?
Right.
That's my question to God.
Yeah.
How were they supposed to know they were being deceived?
Well, they just should have known. They should have all read the Pentateuch. They should have all read the Torah.
Yeah.
Which apparently there were copies floating around everywhere.
Right.
But now we know actually there probably weren't at all. So.
Right, yeah.
Question mark? Furthermore, God did not consider those who received the words of the false prophets as without guilt. They were responsible for rejecting the words of the true prophets, Jeremiah's and others like him. They were responsible for receiving the smooth but false words of the false prophets. Okay. They get what they get, and they don't get upset.
Whatever.
I'm like,
I think
off.
God's a dick.
God is a dick.
Yeah.
So, chapter 15. This chapter includes the second of the passages known as the Confessions of Jeremiah.
Okay.
So, the second time that he's like, you know, oh, God, please.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Right.
So, moving to the first verse says, Then the Lord said to me, even if Moses and Samuel stood before me, my mind would not be favorable toward this people.
Right.
So Moses and Samuel are both well known for their successful intercession on behalf of Israel. But here the Lord rejects Jeremiah's intercession. And the reason that I'm re-upping this is because there was a further statement that I found super interesting. The putting of this as a case in and of itself shows that they do not, in fact, stand before him, and that saints in heaven do not pray for saints on earth.
What do you mean exactly?
So, there are some people today, Catholics a lot, believe in saints, right?
Sure.
And so you pray to certain saints. And,
Yeah.
And so the saints are, up there floating around, and they pray for the saints on earth, right? And they can intercede on your behalf, right?
Sure.
But God is saying, even if they stood before me, oh, so they don't then.
Got it.
Oh, so the saints don't stand before you.
I see.
Because if any saints were going to stand before you, surely Moses would be among them, right?
Right.
And he's not. Oh, shit. Catholics got it wrong. So I found that interesting.
Yeah.
Not only don't they stand before him, but clearly they are not able to intercede on the behalf of these people.
I see your point, and I see the message there, but I just to defend the possibility of it being another way, the fact that there are so many different translations of the Bible and the way things are worded mean dramatically different things. I could allow for this phrasing could mean something else. You know what I mean?
All right, I'm just saying.
I'm just throwing that out there as
I'm just saying that dude is like, can you please? Like, you've done this before. Jeremiah is like, God, please. And God is like, hell no. Even if those two guys stood before me, I wouldn't.
Keep in mind, I don't like being thrown in the position of defending Catholicism at all.
Well, shit. So, okay, moving on to verse 4. I will hand them over to trouble to all kingdoms of the earth because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for what he did in Jerusalem. So he's like, remember that time Manasseh? Oh, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
So fuck you guys today.
Right.
So it might appear from this that the invasion and captivity of Judah were the consequences of Manasseh's wicked reign. Like that God's like holding a grudge. Like, remember that time?
Yeah.
Okay. But it was not that reign alone, argues this apologist, that resulted in such disasters. It was because the people persevered in that wickedness. Like they kept on about it. They resented and disapproved of Josiah's reforms. As soon as Joachim came to the throne, they heartily supported that king's campaign to restore all of the idols of Manasseh's reign. And then when Jeremiah's prophecies appeared to be a hindrance to this resurgence of paganism, they plotted to kill Jeremiah.
Got it.
So
it was very political.
Yeah.
This whole thing was very political.
Very, yeah. I found that statement interesting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just because of Manasseh, though. It was because of everything that came after.
Right.
At least according.
Again, I mean, the fact that there are kings squabbling over which, way they're going to do things with regard to religion.
Right.
Almost, in my mind, solidifies the idea that there was no way a common person could possibly.
Right.
Possibly, not even remotely know what the correct answers would have been.
Right.
And that's assuming that there was a correct answer, which in my mind there's not.
Right.
It's just life. This is the way things were, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the king, if God were real, the kings would be one of the most important people that would know about these things as though they were real. But even the kings don't fully believe the message
at all.
Right.
Or if they do believe it, they're surely not scared of it.
Well, it depends on which king we're talking about, right? But there are kings that are fine with going back to the Asherah poles and the Baal worshiping and all that.
And there's others that are probably like, I don't give two shits what y'all do.
Right.
I'm just here to, sit on the throne and get the gold.
Yeah.
I can imagine that was at least a few of them.
Well, and who was even King David, right? He was remember the last chapter of the book where we were reading about David, and he had suddenly married like thousands of women from different cultures and different religions, and like he was allowing, worship at. Like it was crazy.
And then on his deathbed, he had that little girl in his bed,
right?
To warm his body, but it wasn't sexual. They were quick to say,
right.
And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah. Anyways,
mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we move on to Jeremiah's personal woe. Okay, and that's where he's like, dude, this sucks so hard. Again, still some more. I hate this.
Yeah.
And this confession is an act of protest in which Jeremiah embodies the questions of the exiles while he complains about his people. His hope is that if he repents, he will be delivered from the hands of the wicked. So remember, he was praying like, dear God, you are so fucking great and just and righteous.
Yeah.
But like these folks are trying to kill me. So can you kill them? But also, could you not kill any of us? But also, could you save me?
Right.
And so he was like hoping that he would be, saved at least from his neighbors.
Right.
And so that is the end of the Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hopefully you all enjoyed our Q&A session for this week. And we will be back tomorrow, probably later in the day, with our
Sacrilegious Book Club.
That's right. And I'll be back. I'll get the weekly wrap up together after that. And then we'll be back on Monday with
Jeremiah chapter 16.
All right. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Hey, wife. I guess that's the end?
But husband, that's just sad.
It doesn't have to be. We are on lots of social media platforms like Twitter. Our handle there is sacrilegious_D.
For D's nuts.
Oh my God. Stop doing that. Anyway, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. There's a link to all of our social media sites at our website.
Ooh, we have a website?
Yeah, it's sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, where you can also find a link to our merch shop.
We have a merch shop?
Yep, we have podcast-themed clothing, mugs, notebooks, and more, as well as an atheist and science-themed products.
Wow, our fans should really go check that out right now.
Definitely. They can get in touch with us by sending an email to sacrilegiousdiscourse@gmail.com. But before they do that, we could really use some help.
Oh yeah? With what?
Well, it's not free running the podcast, and we need some financial support in order to get better equipment, which will free up time so we can concentrate on our podcast and our fans.
Okay, so what should they do?
Head over to patreon.com/sacrilegiousdiscourse and sign up as a contributor on our podcast. Supporters there receive additional bi-weekly episodes that we record just for our Patreon members for as little as $2 a month.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using.
And Apple Podcast reviews help us out tremendously.
Like and subscribe. Leave an Apple review. Join us on Twitter. Support us on Patreon. That's a lot of instructions. Don't forget to say thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.